Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Melanie Cassar, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Acting Sub-Lieutenant Callum Sweet. This evening's Last Post ceremony commemorates the 80th anniversary of the end of the Battle of Java, which occurred during the Second World War in March 1942. Following Japan's entry into the Second World War in December 1941, the Japanese began rapidly seizing territory in Southeast Asia in early 1942. Malaya quickly fell, then Singapore followed on the 15th of February. Further south, Java remained in Allied hands and was now in Japan's sights. After defeating Allied naval forces at the Battle of Sunda Strait and Java Sea, the Japanese invasion force of around 34,000 men began landing at two main points on Java's north coast on the night of the 28th of February. The Allied defenders numbered about the same and comprised of Dutch, British, American and Australian troops. The 3,000 Australians under Brigadier Arthur Blackburn VC were mostly men returning from the Middle East. They had been diverted to defend the island. They mainly comprised of machine gunners, pioneers and engineers, and they were quickly reorganised as infantry, and they were stationed in Western Java. The Japanese quickly moved inland and outmanoeuvred the island's defenders. The Australians were able to hold up the Japanese advance at Llewellyn for 2 days, but were then forced to retreat further inland. The Dutch capitulated on the 8th of March, their allies on the 12th of March, 80 years ago today. More than 2,700 Australians became prisoners of war and would spend the next 3.5 years in captivity. Java remained in Japanese hands until war's end in August 1945. Today, we remember all those who fought in the Battle of Java. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. We warmly welcome Mr. John King, President of the Return and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Club Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. If able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the secret which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we pay tribute to Captain Douglas David Guild. Douglas Guild was born on the 7th of December 1916 in the Victorian town of Seymour. Known as Doug, he was one of 3 children born to local storeman Thomas Guild and his wife, Elsie. Young Doug received his early education at Seymour Higher Elementary School before going on to attend Melbourne Technical College, where he studied architecture. Doug was a keen student and sportsman, also served in the 3rd Division Engineers as a provisional lieutenant. At the outbreak of the Second World War, he was working in Melbourne for the acclaimed architect Harry Norris. Doug Guild enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 1st of May 1940. He travelled to Puckapunyal to join the ranks of the 2nd Pioneer Battalion within the rank of lieutenant. He trained with his unit and became a keen organiser of sporting matches amongst the troops. After completing training, he travelled to Sydney, where in April 1941 he embarked on the troopship Queen Mary, bound for overseas service. The 2nd Pioneers disembarked in Egypt a month later and proceeded to Palestine to set up camp. Guild's first experience of battle came in 1941, when his battalion supported the 7th Division's attacks in Syria. The 2nd Pioneers had been tasked with breaching formidable defences and improving and repairing roads and artillery approaches. As the fighting raged on, Guild was wounded in the knee on the 18th of June and spent the next 6 weeks in hospital. Having made a full recovery in September 1941, Guild was selected for further training and he began a course at the nearby School of Engineering. He was promoted to captain on completion of the course and returned to the 2nd Pioneers in late October. Guild and his men spent the rest of 1941 around Tripoli, where they were involved in training and garrison duties. In the new year, they boarded the troop ship Orcades and headed for Australia. During the voyage, news reached the troops the British forces in Singapore had surrendered to the Japanese. With the Netherlands East Indies now in peril, the Orcades was diverted to Java, where Allied forces hoped to stem the enemy's advance. Guild arrived in Java on the 18th of February 1942, and his unit joined Black Force, an ad hoc unit comprised of non-infantry units commanded by Brigadier Arthur Blackburn. Within weeks of their arrival, the Japanese began their attack on Java, and the 2nd Pioneers were drawn into the fighting around Britzenzorg in the island's northwest. Black Force attempted to hold off the enemy to allow other Allied forces to withdraw to the town of Bangdang, but were overrun by the Japanese advance. By late afternoon on the 4th of March, Black Force was coming under heavy fire as it was slowly encircled by the enemy. By the following morning, the surviving groups of the 2nd Pioneers had lost touch with each other and were losing men as the Japanese advanced. Carrying their wounded on improvised stretchers, Guild and his remaining 67 men began withdrawing and attempted to evade the enemy. Guild was eventually forced to divide the men into smaller groups before giving orders for them to make their way to the south coast, where he hoped they could escape by sea. By the 13th of March, Guild and most of his men had reached Palabuhan Harbour, but failed to organise escape by boat. Over the following days, they hid in the mountains and attempted to organise guerrilla warfare. Disease and sickness began to take its toll, and by April, the Japanese were rounding up the remaining outposts. Sensing his final opportunity to evade capture, Guild made another attempt to reach the coast and escape by sea on the 1st of May 1942. He was never seen again. Those who survived the fall of Java became prisoners of war and spent the next 3 years living and working in hellish conditions in the Japanese camps. Guild's fate remained unknown until 1946, when he was presumed to have died in Java on the 1st of May 1942. His remains were never recovered, and today he is commemorated on the Singapore Memorial among more than 24,000 others who have no known grave. Doug Guild was 25 years old. His name is listed on the honour roll on my left, amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Captain Douglas David Guild, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, in the hope for a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On the behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We appreciate your visit, despite the challenges posed by COVID, and wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.